You think you can handle me? She smiled. The rancher froze before it all changed. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty street of Redemption Creek as Adelaide Hart stood before the weathered general store, her trembling fingers clutching the last precious thing she owned, her mother's golden locket. The delicate piece caught the harsh afternoon light, casting tiny prisms across her dirt-stained dress. Her stomach had stopped growling 2 days ago, replaced by a hollow numbness that frightened her more than the hunger itself. Please, she whispered to the store owner, a portly man with suspicious eyes. It's real gold. My mother gave it to me before... Her voice cracked. Before the cholera took her. Before Adelaide's father drank himself to death. Before her uncle sold her like cattle to Jacob Thornton, a man whose reputation for cruelty preceded him like a dark shadow. She'd run 3 days ago, fleeing in the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and this locket. Now, standing in this God-forsaken town, she had nowhere left to run, and nothing left to trade except her dignity. And she'd sooner die than surrender that. Before we continue with Adelaide's story, I'd love to ask you a favor. If you're enjoying this tale from the Wild West, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. It truly means the world to us and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. Your support helps us keep these narratives alive. Thank you so much. The store owner snatched the locket from her palm, examining it with practiced skepticism. Might get you a loaf of bread, maybe some jerky if I'm feeling generous. Adelaide's heart sank. That wouldn't last more than 2 days. Then what? The lady needs more than bread. The voice came from behind her, deep, steady, with an authority that made the store owner straighten immediately. Adelaide turned to find herself looking up at a man who seemed carved from the very landscape itself. He stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered beneath a dusty brown shirt, with arms that spoke of years working the land. His face was weathered by sun and wind, strong-jawed, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, a mark that somehow made his hazel eyes more striking rather than less. A worn Stetson shadowed those eyes, but she could feel their intensity studying her with an unsettling combination of concern and assessment. "This ain't your concern, Callahan," the store owner grumbled. "I'm making it my concern, Turner." The man called Callahan stepped closer, and Adelaide caught the scent of leather, sage, and honest sweat. "You know that locket's worth at least $30. Give the lady fair value or give it back." Turner's jaw worked, but he placed the locket on the counter with grudging respect. "Fine. 30 in store credit." "Cash," Callahan corrected, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Once the transaction was complete, Adelaide found herself standing on the wooden boardwalk with $30 clutched in her hand and the stranger still beside her. Up close, she noticed the calluses on his hands, the dust on his boots, the way he held himself with quiet confidence, rather than the aggressive posturing she'd learned to fear in men. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to repay." "Don't need repaying." He studied her face, taking in the exhaustion, the fear poorly masked by pride, the bruises on her wrists that her sleeves didn't quite cover. "But you need more than $30. When's the last time you ate?" Adelaide lifted her chin, a flash of defiance sparking in her emerald eyes despite her desperate circumstances. "That's not your concern, Mr. Callahan." "James," he corrected gently. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed his suspicion. How could this stranger read her so easily? "The Thornton brand," James said quietly, nodding toward the fading mark on her left hand. A T burned into the skin between her thumb and forefinger, the way ranchers marked their cattle. "I know Jacob's reputation. You were smart to run." Tears burned behind Adelaide's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "He'll come looking for me. He always gets what he considers his property." "You're not property." James's voice carried such conviction that Adelaide found herself believing him, if only for a moment. "You're a person, and I'm guessing you need somewhere safe to stay while you figure out your next move." "I can't accept charity from a stranger. Not charity. I need help at my ranch. Cook left last month, and I'm burning everything I try to make." A hint of a smile touched his weathered face. "You can cook? I can cook, clean, mend, tend animals?" Adelaide stopped, realizing she sounded desperate. "What I mean is, I can work for my keep." "Then we have an arrangement." James extended his hand. "Silver Creek Ranch, 5 miles north, room, board, and $20 a month." Adelaide stared at his hand, work roughened, scarred, but offered with respect rather than entitlement. Slowly, she placed her smaller hand in his, feeling the warmth and strength there. "Adelaide Hart," she introduced herself. "Well, Miss Hart, let's get you fed and settled before the sun sets." The ride to Silver Creek Ranch revealed a landscape of harsh beauty that took Adelaide's breath away. Rolling hills stretched endlessly beneath a sky so vast it made her feel both insignificant and strangely free. Mesquite trees dotted the prairie, their twisted branches casting long shadows as the sun began its descent. The air smelled of wild sage and approaching rain, and for the first time in months, Adelaide felt something other than fear. She felt possibility. James Callahan drove the wagon with easy competence, his silence comfortable rather than oppressive. Adelaide found herself stealing glances at his profile, noting the way his jaw clenched when they passed over rough terrain, as if he felt every jolt she experienced. When the ranch finally came into view, nestled in a valley with a creek running silver through its center, something in Adelaide's chest loosened. The main house was modest but well-maintained, a 2-story structure of weathered wood with a wide porch. Beyond it stood a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. A few hands worked in the distance, tending to horses and cattle. Everything spoke of hard work and honest living. "It's not fancy," James said, helping her down from the wagon. His hands on her waist were firm but gentle, and he released her the moment her feet touched solid ground. But it's solid and safe. That word again, safe. Adelaide hadn't felt safe in so long, she'd almost forgotten what it meant. The bunkhouse cook, a weathered woman named Rosie with kind eyes, showed Adelaide to a small but clean room off the kitchen. It had a real bed with fresh linens, a washstand with a porcelain pitcher, and a window overlooking the creek. Adelaide had to bite her lip to keep from crying. "Mr. Callahan's a good man," Rosie said, bustling about to make the best meal I've had in months, he said simply. Over the following weeks, Adelaide fell into a rhythm that felt almost like belonging. She rose before dawn, prepared breakfast for James and the handful of ranch hands, tended the kitchen garden, baked bread, mended clothes, and slowly began to feel like a person again, rather than a possession. James was different from any man she'd known. He said please and thank you. He never raised his voice. When she accidentally burned the biscuits one morning, he simply smiled and said, "Guess I'll have an extra helping of gravy to make up for it." He worked harder than anyone on the ranch, often returning to the house after dark, covered in dust and sweat. But he always stopped to ask about her day. One evening, 3 weeks into her stay, James found her struggling to lift a heavy pot from the stove. Without a word, he stepped in and moved it for her, his nearness making her suddenly aware of the heat radiating from his body, the way his shirt clung to his muscular frame. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said quietly. "I'm not used to having help. Get used to it." Their eyes met, held for a moment too long. Adelaide's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory, feelings she couldn't afford, not when Jacob Thornton could appear any day to drag her back. As if summoning a devil by thinking his name, the next morning brought trouble. Adelaide was collecting eggs from the henhouse when she heard raised voices from the main yard. Her blood turned to ice when she recognized the sharp, cruel tone of Jacob Thornton. "I know you're hiding her, Callahan. That girl is mine by legal contract. Her uncle sold her to me fair and square." Adelaide pressed herself against the henhouse wall, her breath coming in short gasps. Through a crack in the wood, she could see Jacob, tall, wiry, with cold blue eyes and a mouth that smiled while planning cruelty. 2 of his men flanked him, hands resting on their gun belts. James stood on his porch, his stance deceptively relaxed. But Adelaide had learned to read the tension in his shoulders, the set of his jaw. "Don't see any girl here who answers to you, Thornton," James said, his voice carrying across the yard with dangerous calm. "Don't play games with me." Adelaide Hart, brown hair, green eyes, got my brand on her hand. "You think I don't have eyes in this county? If there was such a woman here, and I'm not saying there is, she'd be a free person working for wages, not property to be claimed." Jacob's laugh was ugly. "The law sees it different. I got papers." "Papers that say you can own a human being?" James descended the porch steps slowly. "We fought a war over that, Thornton. Or did you miss that while you were too busy torturing women?" The insult hung in the air like gunpowder. Jacob's hand moved toward his pistol. Adelaide burst from the henhouse, unable to let James risk his life for her. "Stop!" Every eye turned to her as she walked across the yard, her legs trembling, but her head held high. She saw James's expression shift from controlled anger to something like fear, not for himself, but for her. "Adelaide, get back inside," James ordered, his voice tight. "No." She stopped between the 2 men, facing Jacob, despite every instinct screaming at her to run. "You want me? Fine. But leave Mr. Callahan and his ranch alone. This is between us." Jacob's smile was triumphant and revolting. "Finally showing some sense. Get your things. We're leaving." "She's not going anywhere." James's hand was suddenly on Adelaide's shoulder, pulling her gently but firmly behind him. The gesture was protective, possessive even, but in a way that made Adelaide feel cherished rather than owned. "Your contract was with her uncle, not with her," James continued. "And even if it was, you branded her like an animal. Any judge with half a conscience would void that agreement as cruel and unusual." "We'll see what Judge Harmon says when I ride into town tomorrow," Jacob sneered. "He owes me favors. I'll have the law on my side, Callahan, and you'll hang for harboring my property." "Then I guess we'll see you in court." James's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Now get off my land before I forget I'm trying to be civilized about this." For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Jacob spat in the dust at their feet. "This ain't over, Callahan. Not by a long shot. And you He pointed at Adelaide with a finger that made her skin crawl. "You'll pay for every day you made me chase you. I promise you that." When Thornton and his men finally rode away, Adelaide found she couldn't stop shaking. James turned to her, his hands hovering near her shoulders as if he wanted to touch her but wasn't sure he should. "You shouldn't have come out," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "He was going to shoot you. I've been shot before. I'd survive." His hazel eyes searched her face. "But if he'd taken you, Adelaide—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "I can't let that happen." "Why?" The word burst from her, desperate and confused. "Why do you care so much? I'm just your cook. We barely know each other." James was quiet for a long moment, his gaze intense enough to make Adelaide's breath catch. "Because when I look at you, I don't just see someone who needs saving. I see someone worth fighting for. Someone strong and brave and—" He stopped himself, stepping back. "We'll go to town tomorrow. Talk to Judge Harmon ourselves. Get ahead of Thornton's lies." But Adelaide wasn't ready to let the moment pass. "James, what were you going to say?" "Nothing that won't keep." He tipped his hat, already walking away. "Get inside and rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." That night, Adelaide lay in her small bed, listening to the creek babble outside her window and replaying every interaction with James Callahan. The way he looked at her sometimes, like she was something precious. The way his voice softened when he said her name. The way her heart raced whenever he was near. This was more than gratitude, more than relief at being safe. She was falling for her rescuer, and that terrified her, almost as much as Jacob Thornton did. The next morning dawned gray and heavy with the promise of rain. James hitched the wagon before sunrise, his movements tense and efficient. Adelaide wore her best dress, which wasn't saying much, and pinned her hair carefully, wanting to look respectable for the judge. The ride into Redemption Creek was quiet, the earlier ease between them replaced by anxious anticipation. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and Adelaide couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was coming, both literal and metaphorical. Judge Harmon's office was above the courthouse, a cramped space that smelled of old paper and tobacco. The judge himself was a round man with shrewd eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently fixed in a skeptical frown. "Mr. Callahan," he greeted, barely glancing at Adelaide. "What brings you to my office on this fine morning?" James laid out the situation with calm precision, presenting Adelaide's case while she stood silently, trying not to feel like evidence in her own life. When he mentioned the brand on her hand, Judge Harmon finally looked at her directly. "May I see?" Adelaide extended her hand, the T-shaped scar still visible despite her attempts to treat it with salve. The judge's expression didn't change. "Jacob Thornton has certain legal rights regarding this matter," he said finally. "Her uncle entered into a marriage contract." "Under duress," James interrupted. "The uncle was paid to hand over his niece. That's not marriage, that's slavery." "Strong words, Mr. Callahan." The judge leaned back in his chair. "But the law is clear. Unless Miss Hart can prove undue hardship or provide alternative arrangements." "She has alternative arrangements. She works for me at Silver Creek Ranch under legal employment. For now." Judge Harmon steepled his fingers. "But what happens when that arrangement ends? Mr. Thornton has invested resources in acquiring Miss Hart's hand. He's entitled to compensation at the very least." Adelaide's stomach turned. She was being discussed like a business transaction, not a human being. "How much?" James's voice was tight. "James, no," Adelaide started, but he raised a hand. How much does Thornton claim he's owed? $200, plus interest. The judge pulled out a ledger. Comes to $250, all told. It was an enormous sum, more than most men made in half a year. Adelaide watched James's jaw clench, saw the calculation in his eyes. "I'll pay it," he said quietly. "James, I can't let you." "You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to do this." He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his hazel eyes made her breath catch. "You're worth more than $250, Adelaide. You're worth—" He stopped, seeming to catch himself. "You're worth fighting for." Judge Harmon watched this exchange with something that might have been amusement or approval. "Very well. I'll draw up the necessary documents. The debt will be transferred to you, Mr. Callahan, and Miss Hart will be free of her obligation to Mr. Thornton. However," he fixed James with a stern look, "this doesn't constitute a marriage arrangement. If you're thinking of courting the young lady, you'll do it properly." Adelaide's face burned. "Your Honor, Mr. Callahan has been nothing but respectful." "I'm sure he has." The judge pulled out paper and began writing. "I'll have these ready by tomorrow. In the meantime, I suggest you both stay out of Mr. Thornton's way. He's not going to take kindly to being denied what he considers his property." They left the courthouse under increasingly dark skies. Thunder rumbled in the distance as James helped Adelaide into the wagon, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment. "You didn't have to do that," Adelaide said as they started the journey home. "Yes, I did. But $250, that's your whole profit from last season's cattle drive. Maybe more." "Money can be earned back." James kept his eyes on the road, his profile stern. "Some things can't. Your freedom's one of them. So now I owe you instead of Thornton?" "You don't owe me anything, Adelaide." His voice was sharp, almost angry. "That's the whole damn point. You're not a debt to be collected. You're—" He stopped, jaw working. "I'm what?" Adelaide pressed, something desperate rising in her chest. The first fat raindrops began to fall, spattering the dusty road. James urged the horses faster, but within minutes, the skies opened with the kind of downpour that turned roads into rivers. Lightning cracked overhead, spooking the horses. James fought to control them as the wagon lurched through deepening mud. "Damn it!" The wheel hit a rut with a sickening crack. The wagon tilted violently, throwing Adelaide against James's solid frame. His arm came around her instinctively, holding her secure as he wrestled the horses to a stop. When the world settled, Adelaide found herself pressed against James's chest, his arms still wrapped around her, both of them soaked to the skin. She could feel his heart hammering against her own racing pulse. "You all right?" he asked, his voice rough. Adelaide looked up, finding his face mere inches from hers. Water dripped from the brim of his hat, and his hazel eyes were dark with something that made her stomach flip. "I'm fine," she whispered, but she didn't pull away. Neither did he. For a suspended moment, the world consisted only of rain and thunder, and the heat building between them, despite the cold water soaking their clothes. James's free hand came up slowly, hesitantly, to cup her cheek. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Adelaide," he breathed, and her name had never sounded like that before, like a prayer, like a question, like a promise. "Yes, I need to tell you something, and I don't know if it's the right time, but after today, after almost losing you to Thornton," he stopped, his jaw clenching. "You asked what you are to me. You're everything I wasn't looking for, and everything I didn't know I needed. You're the first person in 3 years who made me want to feel again." Adelaide's breath caught. James, let me finish. Please. His thumb continued its gentle exploration of her face, as if memorizing every detail. I know you've been hurt. I know you don't trust men, and you've got every reason for that. I know you probably see me as just another man trying to control you. But Adelaide, I don't want to own you. I want, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper, I want to deserve you. Tears mixed with rain on Adelaide's cheeks. You already do. You've shown me more respect and kindness in a month than I've known in my entire life. When you touch me, I don't feel afraid. I feel, she struggled for words, I feel seen, like I'm a person, not a thing. You are a person, the strongest person I know. James's hand trembled slightly against her face. And if I'm being honest, you scare the hell out of me. Adelaide couldn't help a small laugh. I scare you? Terrify me. Because I'm starting to need you, Adelaide Hart. And needing someone means they can hurt you, can leave you. His eyes darkened with old pain. I swore I'd never let myself need anyone again after Mary died. But then you walked into my life, proud and fierce and refusing to be broken. And suddenly I can't imagine my days without you in them. The vulnerability in his confession undid something in Adelaide's chest. Here was this strong, capable man, admitting his fear, his need, his wanting, not demanding, not taking, just offering his heart with trembling hands and hoping she'd be careful with it. I'm scared too, she admitted. Every time I start to feel something for you, I remember what happened with Thornton, what my uncle did. I remember that trusting men has only brought me pain. I know, and I'm not asking you to trust me right away. I'm just asking. He paused, searching her eyes. I'm asking for a chance, to prove I'm different, to prove that not every man wants to cage you. Some of us just want to see you fly. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating James's face with stark clarity. In that flash, Adelaide saw everything. The hope, the fear, the wanting, the determination to be worthy of her. She made her decision. Rising up on her toes, Adelaide closed the small distance between them and pressed her lips to his. For a heartbeat, James froze, as if shocked by her boldness. Then he responded with a tenderness that made Adelaide's knees weak. His kiss was gentle, reverent, as if he held something infinitely precious and fragile. His hand slid into her wet hair, while his other arm tightened around her waist, pulling her closer, but never crushing, always leaving her room to breathe, to retreat if she wanted. Adelaide didn't want to retreat. She wanted to dive deeper into this feeling, this combination of safety and excitement, of being wanted and respected at the same time. When James' tongue traced her lower lip, seeking permission rather than taking, Adelaide opened for him with a soft gasp. The kiss deepened, turned from tender to desperate. 3 years of loneliness for him. A lifetime of longing for gentleness for her. All of it poured into this moment in the rain, with thunder providing percussion for their mutual surrender. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. Adelaide, he whispered, and she loved the way he said her name, like it was important, like she mattered. I want this, she said firmly, needing him to understand. I want you. I'm choosing this, James. I'm choosing you. His smile was like sunrise after a long night. Then I'm the luckiest man in Texas. They made it back to the ranch in sodden, happy silence, the broken wheel forgotten in light of what had shifted between them. The ranch hands gave them knowing looks as they walked into the house together. But Adelaide found she didn't care. Let them know. Let everyone know. That night, as Adelaide prepared for bed, there was a soft knock on her door. She opened it to find James standing there, cleaned up and wearing a fresh shirt, his hair still damp. "I know it's late," he said, suddenly awkward in a way that made her heart swell. "But I couldn't sleep without making sure you were all right. After everything today." Adelaide pulled him inside and kissed him again, softer this time. A promise, rather than a desperate claiming. "I'm better than all right," she said against his lips. "I'm happy." "Good, because I intend to keep you that way." James cupped her face with both hands, his touch reverent. "I know we're moving fast. I know we should probably court properly, take our time." "James Callahan, are you trying to talk yourself out of kissing me?" His laugh was startled and genuine. "No, ma'am, just trying to do right by you." "You are doing right by me, by respecting me enough to let me make my own choices." Adelaide traced the scar through his eyebrow, fascinated by this man who was both so strong and so gentle. "And I choose this. I choose you." They stood there, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, until James finally, reluctantly pulled away. "I should let you rest." "Stay," Adelaide said impulsively. Then, seeing his eyes widen, she clarified. I mean just stay for a while. Talk to me. Tell me about Mary." James's expression shuddered slightly. "Adelaide, please, if we're going to do this, I need to know. I need to know what I'm up against." After a moment, James nodded. They sat together on the edge of her bed, proper distance between them, but hands clasped. And in the quiet darkness, with rain still pattering against the window, James told her about his late wife. Mary was sweet, kind, everything a wife should be, or so everyone said. His voice was distant, remembering. But she was fragile too, delicate. She needed protecting from everything. Harsh words, hard work, harsh truths. "I spent 3 years trying to keep the world from touching her." "You loved her." "I did. But looking back, I'm not sure either of us was truly happy. She wanted me to be softer than I am. I wanted her to be stronger than she was. When she got pregnant, everyone was so excited. A baby would make everything better, they said." His jaw clenched. "But the childbirth was hard. Too hard. The baby, our son, he only lived an hour. And Mary," his voice cracked. "She looked at me at the end and said, 'I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough.' Those were her last words." Adelaide's heart ached for him, for both of them. "That wasn't her fault, or yours, I know. But for a long time, I blamed myself for not being able to protect her, for failing to keep her safe." He turned to look at Adelaide directly. "That's why you're different. You don't need me to protect you from the world. You face it head on, even when you're terrified. You're strong in ways Mary never got the chance to be. And you make me want to be better, not softer. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Adelaide squeezed his hand. "Thank you for telling me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, until Adelaide's yawns became too frequent to ignore. James kissed her forehead gently and finally left, leaving Adelaide to fall asleep with a smile on her face and hope blooming in her chest. The next morning brought both resolution and new complications. Judge Harmon sent word that the paperwork was ready. Adelaide's debt to Thornton had been legally transferred to James, who promptly tore up the documents in front of the judge and declared Adelaide free of all obligation. "You're your own woman now," James said as they stood in the judge's office. "No contracts, no debts. No one has any claim on you but you." Adelaide had to swallow hard against the emotion rising in her throat. Freedom. Real, legal, documented freedom. But that freedom came with a price, they discovered, when they returned to Silver Creek Ranch to find the barn engulfed in flames. No, James was off the wagon before it fully stopped, running toward the inferno. Adelaide followed, her heart in her throat. The ranch hands had formed a bucket brigade from the creek, fighting the fire desperately. Smoke billowed black and thick into the afternoon sky. Adelaide could hear horses screaming inside. Without thinking, James ran toward the barn entrance. "James, no!" Adelaide screamed. But he was already inside, disappearing into the smoke. The next 2 minutes were the longest of Adelaide's life. She stood frozen, unable to breathe, certain that the universe couldn't be cruel enough to give her this happiness and then snatch it away so brutally. Then James emerged from the smoke, leading a panicked horse, his face black with soot, coughing violently. He handed the horse to one of the hands and went back in. 3 more times he entered that burning barn. 3 more times he emerged with animals, each time looking worse, moving slower. When the roof began to collapse with a sound like the world ending, and James was still inside, Adelaide couldn't stand it anymore. She grabbed a wet blanket from one of the hands, wrapped it around herself, and ran into the inferno. The heat was unbearable, the smoke choking. Adelaide couldn't see more than a few feet in front of her. "James!" she screamed. "James!" A cough answered her. To the left. Adelaide pushed through the smoke and found him pinned under a fallen beam. A wild-eyed mare, dancing nervously nearby, too scared to bolt, but too panicked to be of help. "Adelaide, what the hell? Get out of here!" James tried to rise but winced, the beam across his leg too heavy to shift alone. "Not without you." Adelaide grabbed the beam, her hands immediately blistering from the heat. She pulled with everything she had, driven by a strength born of desperation and love. Yes, love. She could admit it now in this moment, when she might lose him forever. The beam shifted. Not much, but enough. James pulled himself free with a groan of pain. Adelaide caught the mare's halter, using every trick she'd learned watching James work with horses. "Easy, girl. Easy now. We're getting out. Together." The words seemed to calm both James and the horse. Together, they stumbled toward the entrance, the smoke thicker now, the flames hungrier. Just as they reached the door, another section of roof fell behind them with a roar that sounded like death itself. They collapsed outside in the grass, coughing, gasping, alive. The hands managed to save most of the barn's contents, but the structure itself was a loss. As they watched it burn, James's arm came around Adelaide's shoulders, pulling her close. "You could have died," he said, his voice raw from smoke and emotion. "So could you." Adelaide turned to face him, not caring that they were both filthy and singed. "That's the point, James. If you're in danger, I'm coming for you, just like you'd come for me. That's what this means, choosing each other." James stared at her for a long moment, his hazel eyes reflecting the dying flames. Then he kissed her, rough and desperate and tasting of smoke and survival. When they broke apart, Adelaide saw tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on his face. "Marry me," he said simply. Adelaide's breath caught, What? Marry me, Adelaide Hart. Not because you owe me. Not because I saved you or you saved me. Marry me because I love you, and I can't imagine facing another day without you by my side. He cupped her face with both hands, gentle despite the urgency in his voice. I know it's fast. I know we should wait. Do this proper. But I almost lost you today, and I realized I don't want to waste another minute not being your husband if you'll have me. Adelaide laughed through her tears. You're proposing to me while we watch your barn burn down? Is that a no? It's a yes, you stubborn, reckless, wonderful man. Yes, I'll marry you. This time when they kissed, the ranch hands cheered, and Adelaide felt something she'd never thought she'd experience again. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The fire investigation revealed exactly what they'd suspected. Arson. Thornton's revenge for losing what he considered his property. James reported it to the sheriff, who promised to look into it, but they all knew Thornton had enough influence to escape consequences. He's not going to stop, Adelaide said quietly that night as she helped James clean and bandage his burns. His leg was bruised but not broken, thanks to her quick action. As long as I'm here, I'm putting you and your ranch in danger. Then I guess it's good you'll be here as my wife, not just my cook. James caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. I'm not afraid of Thornton, Adelaide, and I'm not letting him drive you away from the first home you've had in God knows how long. Adelaide's eyes burned with unshed tears. This is home, your home. Then stay, marry me. We'll face whatever comes together. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the church in Redemption Creek. Adelaide wore a dress that Rosie helped her make. Nothing fancy, but clean and pretty, with blue ribbon trim that matched the Texas sky. James wore his Sunday best, his hair slicked back, looking both nervous and happier than anyone had seen him in years. Judge Harmon officiated, which felt appropriate given his role in their story. The church was packed. Apparently the whole town had heard about the barn fire and the dramatic rescue, and everyone wanted to see how the romance played out. When James took Adelaide's hands in his and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. Adelaide, I promise to respect your strength while protecting your heart. I promise to be your partner, not your master. I promise to love you in the hard times and the easy ones. And I promise that you'll never doubt your worth again, because I'll spend every day showing you how precious you are to me. Adelaide's vows came through tears. James, you gave me back myself when I thought I'd lost who I was. You showed me that love doesn't have to hurt, that strength and gentleness can exist in the same person. I promise to stand beside you, not behind you. I promise to face our challenges together. And I promise to love you with everything I am, for as long as I breathe. When the judge declared them married and James kissed her, the church erupted in applause. But Adelaide barely heard it. She was too focused on the man holding her, the man who'd saved her in more ways than one, the man she'd chosen and who'd chosen her right back. The reception at Silver Creek Ranch was lively, despite the charred remains of the barn, serving as a sobering reminder of recent events. The hands had set up tables outside, and everyone brought food and drink. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon there was music and dancing under the stars. James led Adelaide in a waltz, both of them laughing when they stumbled over each other's feet. I'm not much of a dancer, James admitted. Good, neither am I. Adelaide leaned her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, strong and steady. "James? Thank you." He pulled back to look at her, confused. For what? For seeing me, for believing I was worth saving, for loving me even when I didn't know how to love myself. She touched his face, tracing the scar through his eyebrow. "You gave me my life back." "No, Adelaide." James covered her hand with his. "You saved yourself. You ran. You survived. You chose to keep fighting. I just gave you a safe place to land while you figured out how strong you already were." As they swayed together under the vast Texas sky, Adelaide realized he was right. She had saved herself. But having James beside her, having someone who believed in her strength rather than fearing it, that made all the difference. The party lasted well into the night, but eventually the guests departed, and Adelaide and James found themselves alone in the ranch house. They climbed the stairs to James's room. Their room now, both suddenly shy, despite the intensity of their earlier kisses. James lit a lamp, casting warm golden light across the space. Adelaide had been in this room before, but never like this, never as his wife. "Are you nervous?" James asked gently, studying her face. Adelaide considered lying, then decided they'd built their relationship on honesty. "A little, not of you," she added quickly, "of disappointing you." James crossed to her in 2 strides, taking her hands. "Adelaide, look at me." He waited until her eyes met his. "There is nothing you could do that would disappoint me. Not tonight, not ever. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for. We can just sleep, or talk, or—" Adelaide kissed him, cutting off his worried rambling. "I want this," she said firmly. "I want you. She struggled for words. "I've never been with anyone who actually cared about what I wanted. It's a lot to get used to." Understanding dawned in James's eyes. "Then we go slow, and you tell me what you want, what feels good, what doesn't. You're in control here, Adelaide. Always." Those words, that promise, undid the last of Adelaide's fear. She reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly, but determined. "I want you to touch me. I want to know what it feels like when someone touches you with love instead of ownership." James's breath hitched. Slowly, giving her time to change her mind, he reached for the buttons of her dress. "Then I'll show you. I'll spend all night showing you if that's what you want." He did exactly that. Every touch was reverent. Every kiss a question seeking permission. When Adelaide tensed, he paused. When she sighed with pleasure, he continued. He mapped her body like sacred territory, finding the places that made her gasp, learning what she liked and what she loved. "Go slow," Adelaide whispered at one point, echoing words she'd heard in nightmares, but this time meaning something entirely different. "It hurts." James immediately stilled. "Do you want me to stop?" "No, just slowly, please." "I'll die before I hurt you," James promised, and she believed him. He was patient, so patient, until Adelaide's body relaxed and accepted him. When they finally moved together, it was nothing like Adelaide had been taught to expect. There was no pain, no taking, no sense of violation. There was only sensation and connection. Pleasure building between them, like a shared language they were learning to speak. After, as they lay tangled together, Adelaide couldn't stop smiling. "What?" James asked, running his fingers through her hair. "I'm happy," she said simply. "I didn't know I could be this happy." James pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Get used to it. I plan to make you this happy every day for the rest of our lives." The next weeks passed in a blur of contentment. James and Adelaide settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. They rebuilt the barn together, Adelaide working alongside the hands to prove she was as much a part of the ranch as anyone. She learned to ride properly, to rope cattle, to shoot straight. James was an excellent teacher, patient and encouraging. But the specter of Thornton still loomed. They'd see his men watching from nearby hills. Once, Adelaide found a skinned rabbit on their porch, a clear threat. The sheriff did nothing, claiming lack of evidence. "He's waiting for something," James said, loading his rifle more carefully each morning, biding his time. The attack came 6 weeks after their wedding. Adelaide was in the kitchen garden at twilight, gathering vegetables for dinner, when she heard the thunder of hoofbeats. She looked up to see 5 riders approaching at a gallop, led by Jacob Thornton. She ran for the house, screaming for James. He burst through the door, rifle in hand. Just as the riders surrounded Adelaide in the yard, Thornton dismounted, his cold blue eyes fixed on her with malicious satisfaction. "Did you think you could escape me? That marrying this fool would protect you? She's my wife now," James called from the porch, his rifle trained on Thornton. "You've got no claim on her. Maybe not legally, but I've got something better." Thornton gestured, and his men produced torches. "I've got fire, and unless your wife comes with me right now, I'm gonna burn this whole ranch to the ground with everyone in it." Adelaide's blood ran cold. She looked at James, saw the calculation in his eyes, the fear for his people. "Don't you dare," James said to her, reading her intention. "Don't you dare give yourself up for me." "I have to. I can't let him hurt everyone because of me." Adelaide stepped toward Thornton, her head held high despite her terror. "I'll go. Just leave the ranch alone." "Adelaide, no!" James started down the steps, but Thornton's men cocked their pistols. "Stay where you are, Callahan. This doesn't concern you anymore." Everything happened at once. The ranch hands emerged from the barn and bunkhouse, rifles ready. Thornton's men backed their horses up nervously, suddenly outnumbered. And Adelaide, seeing her chance, bolted. She ran for the creek, knowing the terrain better than Thornton's men. Behind her, she heard shouting, the crack of a pistol. Her heart hammered as she splashed through the water and up the far bank, using every tracking skill James had taught her. But Thornton was fast. He caught her at the edge of the creek, his hand closing around her arm with bruising force. "You've caused me a lot of trouble," he hissed, spinning her around. His other hand raised, and Adelaide saw the knife glinting in the dying light. Then James was there, tackling Thornton into the water. They went down in a tangle of limbs and fury, the knife flying from Thornton's hand. Adelaide watched in horror as they fought, both landing brutal blows. James was bigger, stronger, but Thornton fought dirty, gouging eyes, going for vulnerable spots. They rolled in the shallow water, and for a terrible moment, Thornton had James pinned, his hands around James's throat. Adelaide didn't think. She grabbed the fallen knife and plunged it into Thornton's shoulder. He screamed, releasing James, who surged up gasping. Before Thornton could recover, James hit him with a right hook that echoed across the water. Thornton collapsed, unconscious. For a moment, they just stood there, breathing hard, soaking wet, staring at each other. Then James pulled Adelaide into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You stabbed him," he said, something like awe in his voice. "He was killing you. You saved me again. We saved each other, together." Adelaide pulled back to look at him, cupping his face. "That's what we do." The sheriff arrived shortly after, summoned by one of the hands. With multiple witnesses to Thornton's threats and attack, even his influence couldn't save him this time. He was arrested for arson, assault, and attempted murder. As the sheriff led him away, Thornton looked back at Adelaide with pure hatred. "This isn't over." "Yes," Adelaide said firmly, standing beside her husband with her hand in his. "It is." Months passed. Thornton was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The barn was rebuilt, bigger and better than before. Adelaide became known throughout the county as a woman not to be crossed, fair but fierce, respected and a little feared. She'd found her strength, and it turned out she liked it. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple, Adelaide leaned her head on James's shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, his arm around her. "How different my life is now. A year ago, I was starving and terrified, ready to trade my mother's locket for a loaf of bread. Now I have a home, a husband, a future." She lifted her head to look at him. "I have everything." "Not everything." James's hand moved to rest on her stomach, where a barely there swell was just beginning to show. "But we're getting there." Adelaide's breath caught. "You knew?" "Rosie told me yesterday, said you'd been feeling poorly in the mornings." His hazel eyes were warm with joy and a little fear. "Are you happy about it?" "Terrified," Adelaide admitted. "But yes, so happy." She covered his hand with hers. "This time will be different. This baby will know only love, only safety. And if it's a girl," her voice caught, "I'll teach her to be strong, to never let anyone own her. And if it's a boy, I'll teach him to respect that strength, to protect without controlling." James kissed her temple. "We'll do this together." "Together," Adelaide echoed, and the word had never sounded sweeter. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Adelaide thought about how far she'd come. From desperation to hope, from fear to love, from being property to being a person. No, more than that, to being a partner, an equal, a woman who'd saved herself and found someone worthy of standing beside her. The view west was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also a place where you could reinvent yourself, where strength mattered more than pedigree, where love could bloom in the most unexpected places. Adelaide Hart Callahan had found all of that and more, and she'd never take it for granted again. Epilogue. 5 years later, Adelaide stood in the rebuilt barn, teaching her 4-year-old daughter, Mary Elizabeth, how to brush a horse properly. The girl had her father's hazel eyes and her mother's determination, already showing signs of being every bit as fierce as Adelaide had become. "Gentle now," Adelaide instructed. "Horses respond to kindness, not force." "Like people?" little Mary asked. Adelaide smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, like people." James appeared in the doorway, their 2-year-old son, Henry, riding on his shoulders. The boy had Adelaide's green eyes and his father's stubborn streak. "The new hands are here," James said, "including that young woman from Oklahoma, the one running from the bad marriage." Adelaide's eyes met her husband's. They'd made it their mission to help women in situations like Adelaide had once been in, offering employment, safety, a chance to start over. Silver Creek Ranch had become known as a place of refuge. "I'll talk to her," Adelaide said, handing the brush to her daughter. "Keep practicing, Mary. Make sure the horses know they're safe with you." As Adelaide walked toward the house to meet the newest arrival, she thought about that terrified girl who'd stood in front of a general store a lifetime ago, ready to trade her last precious possession for survival. That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth. A woman who'd learned that the strongest chains were the ones we put on ourselves, and that real love didn't cage, it set you free. She'd found her happy ending. But more importantly, she'd found herself. And that, Adelaide knew, was the greatest gift of all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Adelaide and James's journey? Did their love story capture the spirit of the American frontier? Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us bring you more stories of courage, romance, and redemption from the Wild West. Until next time, may your own journey be filled with the kind of love that sets you free rather than holds you back.